Kublai Khan could turn the bark of a mulberry tree into money, and punish an empire for refusing to believe in its value. That was the system Marco Polo described. Workers stripped the tree's inner bark, processed its fibers into dark sheets, cut them into different sizes, and marked them with official seals. The material itself was almost worthless. Yet once the state assigned a value to it, these pieces of paper could purchase goods across territories governed by the Mongol-led Yuan dynasty. To a medieval European, the claim bordered on the impossible. Real wealth was supposed to possess weight. Silver rang against a table. Gold shone in firelight. Coins could be hidden, melted, tested, or carried across the sea. Their value appeared to reside in the metal itself. But in Marco's account, the emperor did not need the paper to contain silver. He needed the machinery of government to make it function as though it did. Taxes and official payments pushed the notes into circulation. Merchants bringing precious materials into the imperial system could be required to exchange them for paper. Counterfeiters faced severe punishment. Refusal was not merely a private commercial decision. It challenged the authority that gave the currency its value. Marco seemed to be describing an emperor who manufactured wealth from trees. The system was real, although it was neither new nor flawless. Paper currency had existed in China long before Marco Polo's supposed arrival, and Yuan rulers expanded its use across the territories they controlled. Inflation, counterfeiting, distrust, coercion, and instability could weaken it. Yet Marco's description did more than marvel at an exotic custom. It explained the seals, the assigned values, the compulsory exchange, and the power that kept the notes moving. That detail matters because paper money was only one element of the extraordinary world he claimed to have entered. His book described immense cities and distant markets, roads and waterways carrying goods across vast territories, and officials gathering taxes for a government of exceptional scale. It spoke of relay stations where authorized messengers changed horses and continued without resting for long. It mentioned black stones taken from the earth and burned as fuel. Again and again, the account noticed not only wonders, but systems, how resources moved, how rulers collected revenue, and how authority reached places far from the imperial court. At the center of that world stood Kublai Khan, Mongol sovereign and emperor of the Yuan dynasty. Marco Polo claimed that he had not merely heard stories about this empire. He said that he had crossed Asia, entered Kublai's territories, traveled through them for years, and at times served the ruler who governed them. But the closer the book is examined, the more difficult its author becomes to locate. No surviving Chinese administrative document has been universally accepted as a clear reference to Marco Polo himself. The important official career later tradition attributed to him cannot be confirmed securely. His account is also silent about several subjects that later audiences came to regard as unmistakably Chinese, although those omissions are not as simple or decisive as they first appear. More troubling still, the book was not written down as a private journal during the journey. According to the traditional chronology, Marco returned to Venice in 1295 with his father, Niccolò, and his uncle, Maffeo. They had been absent for roughly 24 years. Later stories transformed their homecoming into legend, describing relatives who failed to recognize them and wealth concealed within their clothing. Such scenes reveal how quickly the traveler became inseparable from the mythology surrounding him. His fame grew after conflict between Venice and Genoa placed him in a Genoese prison. There he met rustic Hello of Pisa, a writer shaped by a literary world of distant courts, heroic journeys, strange peoples, and marvels beyond familiar geography. Rustic Hello was not merely a silent clerk preserving Marco's words exactly as they were spoken. His involvement does not prove that the journey was invented. It does mean that the surviving work cannot be treated as a modern transcript of one man's untouched testimony. The original manuscript has disappeared. What remains is a family of later versions in different languages. Passages appear in some copies and not in others. Names change. Numbers expand or contract. Descriptions are shortened, rearranged, or amplified. The voice now identified as Marco Polo has passed through translators, scribes, editors, and generations of retelling. This creates a contradiction more persistent than any single omission. A complete invention should have been vulnerable to mistakes about the empire's inner workings. Yet the account contains specialized knowledge of Yuan paper currency, taxation, transport, officials, controlled exchange, and the movement of information. It often describes not merely what appeared astonishing, but how the astonishing system functioned. At the same time, accurate knowledge does not prove that Marco personally witnessed every place or event in his book. Merchants, officials, guides, relatives, and experienced travelers carried information across the Mongol world alongside goods. Marco could have combined direct observation with family knowledge, reports from others, remembered conversations, and materials shaped later by rustic hello. The mystery is therefore more precise than the simple question of whether Marco Polo told the truth. If he invented the journey from a distance, where did the book acquire its detailed understanding of the Mongol-led Yuan Empire? But if he lived and traveled there for years, why is the man himself so much harder to verify than the systems he described? To answer that, the story must move behind the legend of the traveler and into the political world that made his account possible, a late 13th century empire joined by roads, taxes, messengers, markets, and laws, yet divided across languages, peoples, regions, and competing centers of power. Marco Polo did not enter a timeless or isolated China. If the traditional account is broadly correct, he entered territories governed by a Mongol-led dynasty and connected to routes stretching across Eurasia. Tradition holds that Marco left Venice in 1271 with Niccolò and Maffeo. His father and uncle had traveled east before and had already reached the sphere of Kublai Khan. Their second journey was therefore not a blind movement into a completely unknown world. They followed routes shaped by merchants, envoys, guides, local protection, and knowledge gathered from earlier travelers. Even so, the distance was immense. They crossed deserts, mountain passages, and territories controlled by changing local powers. Water, shelter, political permission, and reliable guidance could determine whether a caravan continued. The surviving versions of Marco's account do not allow every stage of the route to be reconstructed with confidence. Place names passed through several languages before reaching later copyists, and some locations remain disputed. This uncertainty reflects the difficulty of reconstructing a medieval journey from a work whose original text has been lost. The Polos appear to have traveled through the eastern Mediterranean, the Iranian world, and parts of Central Asia before reaching territories connected to Kublai Khan. Along those routes, information moved beside goods. Merchants described markets, officials explained taxes and roads, and guides repeated reports from earlier travelers. By the time Marco reached the Yuan realm, he may already have carried knowledge formed partly from experience and partly from the memories of others. That distinction lies at the center of the mystery. Even if Marco reached Yuan-controlled China, it does not follow that he personally visited every place in his book. Medieval travel accounts did not always separate direct observation from informed report, family knowledge, hearsay, and literary tradition as strictly as a modern historian would. The traveler and the collector of stories could exist within the same narrator. After years on the road, the Polos entered the political world of Kublai Khan. Kanbalik, near modern Beijing, stood at the heart of his imperial government. It was more than a magnificent capital. Reports, taxation, supplies, officials, and political authority converged there. Orders moved outward. Resources moved inward. The court displayed power, but administration sustained it. Marco wrote of palaces, ceremonies, guards, nobles, and imperial wealth. Some details may have been enlarged through retelling or manuscript transmission. Yet the broader image of a court designed to impress a diverse imperial population is historically plausible. He also claimed that Kublai Khan valued his abilities and sent him on missions. Later tradition expanded these statements into a remarkable official career. Marco was sometimes presented as a governor, advisor, or trusted servant of unusual importance. The evidence is less certain. The book suggests that he traveled under imperial authority and gained access to information beyond that of an ordinary visitor. He repeatedly noticed things rulers and merchants cared about: distances, resources, production, taxation, roads, and the movement of goods. But the exact nature of his role remains unclear. He may have performed temporary duties or traveled under imperial protection. His service may have been real but modest, or it may have grown in importance through retelling. The greater Marco's supposed position becomes, the harder it is to explain why no undisputed record of it has been identified. This is why the strongest evidence may not be the title later tradition gave him. It may be the systems he described. The paper currency introduced at the beginning was therefore more than an exotic marvel. Marco grasped its essential logic: official seals, assigned values, compulsory exchange, taxation, and enforcement allowed the Yuan state to make nearly worthless material function as money. Whether he learned this through direct observation or informed contacts, the description reveals practical knowledge of how imperial authority operated. That habit appears throughout Marco Polo's strongest passages. He was interested not only in what a region possessed, but in what it produced, what people used as money, what rulers collected, and how goods and information moved through the empire. That practical attention could reflect Marco's own experience, informed sources, or, as the surviving book most often suggests, a mixture of both, later shaped by rustic hello and manuscript transmission. And still, beneath those layers, there remains a persistent impression of genuine knowledge. The book recognizes that Kublai Khan's empire was not sustained by spectacle alone. It depended upon paper, seals, taxation, officials, roads, supplies, law, coercion, and the movement of information across enormous distances. These descriptions make complete invention difficult, but they cannot show precisely where Marco learned what he knew. The tension between a recognizable imperial system and an unverifiable traveler will guide the rest of the investigation. A message leaves Kublai Khan's court. It carries an order meant for officials far beyond Canbalic, across plains, rivers, mountain routes, and territories where the ruler himself may never appear. The first rider does not need to complete the entire journey. At a relay station, an exhausted horse is exchanged for a fresh one. Provisions and shelter are available. Official documents identify the traveler as someone moving under imperial authority. Then the message continues. Station by station, horse by horse, the command travels across distances that would otherwise weaken the connection between the court and the provinces. Reports return toward the center. Officials are summoned. News of disorder, taxation, harvests, or local resistance moves with them. Marco Polo described this system with the same practical attention he gave to paper currency. The question was no longer whether he could tell an impressive story. It was whether he understood how an empire worked. The network is commonly associated with the Mongol imperial relay system known as the Yam. Kublai Khan did not invent communication by mounted relay. Earlier states across Asia had used stations, horses, roads, and official messengers, and related systems operated beyond Yuan-controlled territories. The Mongol rulers inherited such traditions, extended them, and organized them across the enormous spaces they governed. Under the Yuan dynasty, authorized travelers could move through stations supplied with horses, food, accommodation, and administrative support. Tablets or documents helped distinguish those traveling on official business from ordinary civilians. The network served the state first. It was not a public transport system open equally to anyone wishing to cross the empire. Conquest could seize territory. Communication helped keep it. Without reliable information, an imperial order might arrive after conditions had changed, and a regional crisis might grow before the court knew it existed. The relay system reduced that isolation, allowing authority to travel while the emperor remained far away. Marco supplied impressive totals for stations, horses, and distances. But surviving manuscripts do not always agree, and medieval numbers were vulnerable to copying errors, embellishment, and misunderstanding. The precise figures may be uncertain. The functional picture is more significant. Marco understood that the system depended upon fresh animals, prepared stations, official authorization, provisions, and disciplined movement. He recognized it not as a chain of inns, but as part of the machinery of government. Whether learned on the road or through informed contacts, this functional understanding makes the passage harder to dismiss as fantasy. The same is true of a smaller detail, one that seems almost ordinary once its meaning is understood. Marco wrote of black stones dug from the ground and burned as fuel. They are generally identified as mineral coal. To European readers accustomed mainly to wood and charcoal, stones feeding a fire may have sounded like another Eastern wonder. Coal was not completely unknown in medieval Europe, but its use was far from universal. In parts of northern China, it had long provided heat and supported craft production where supplies were available. Marco did not describe coal as a rare treasure. He described people using it. The detail fits a real material practice within parts of the Yuan world. It suggests contact with information grounded in ordinary life, although Marco did not need to visit every mine or household to learn it. The problem becomes larger when Marco turns from fuel and roads to a city that seemed to exceed the limits of belief. He called it Kublai. The name is generally understood to refer to Hangzhou, the former capital of the southern Song dynasty. By the time Marco is traditionally believed to have known of it, Mongol forces had conquered the south, and the city had passed under Yuan rule. The conquest changed its political position, but it did not erase the city. Hangzhou remained immense, wealthy, densely inhabited, and deeply connected to commerce. Water shaped its life. Canals carried boats between neighborhoods, markets, warehouses, workshops, and routes leading beyond the city. Goods could move with a volume impossible on crowded streets alone. Marco's description presents a place of almost overwhelming abundance. There are bridges, boats, specialized markets, craft districts, temples, residences, merchants, and large quantities of food and luxury goods. The city appears not as a single mass of buildings, but as a living network held together by water and trade. It is easy to see why medieval Europeans might have treated such a description as fantasy. Many European cities were prosperous and sophisticated, but Hangzhou belonged to an urban tradition formed by a different scale of transport, production, population, and administration. Under the Southern Song, it had been the center of a wealthy court and commercial economy. Under Yuan rule, much of that importance survived. The canals were not decorative. They moved grain, fuel, textiles, food, raw materials, and finished goods. Markets drew in products from surrounding regions. Artisans worked in specialized trades. Merchants connected local production to wider systems of exchange. For Yuan administrators, the city was not merely impressive. It was fiscally valuable. This is where Marco's interests become revealing. He did not simply admire palaces or temples. He repeatedly noticed what passed through markets, what people produced, what authorities taxed, and what revenue could be drawn from prosperous places. The surviving account gives enormous numbers for Hangzhou's bridges, households, districts, guards, markets, and income. Some versions differ from others, and certain totals appear too large to accept literally. Copyists could alter numerals, while medieval writers often used immense figures to communicate grandeur rather than statistical precision. Marco could not have counted every bridge, household, or merchant, and may have relied on local estimates. The exact totals are doubtful, but the structural picture, canals, dense settlement, specialized production, intense commerce, and administrative importance, fits the historical city. Hangzhou was extraordinary even without the inflated numbers. A writer inventing a magnificent city could fill it with limitless gold, strange creatures, and impossible monuments. Marco instead filled Kublai with boats, markets, trades, taxes, bridges, districts, and supplies. His city functions. That does not prove he personally walked every street. Hangzhou was famous across Asian trading networks, and travelers could describe its wealth to someone who had never entered it. Yet the description belongs convincingly to the economic world of the period. And beneath the visible wealth of the city stood something even less romantic: revenue. Marco paid unusual attention to salt. Salt was essential to daily life, but it was also connected to state finance. Across different periods of Chinese history, governments regulated aspects of its production and distribution, though institutions and policies changed over time. Under the Yuan dynasty, salt remained an important source of revenue. To a merchant, this would have been impossible to ignore. Salt had a market. Its production could be supervised. Its movement could be controlled. Taxes and monopoly arrangements could transform an ordinary necessity into a dependable source of income for the state. Marco's account repeatedly turns toward such questions. What does a region produce? How is it transported? Who controls the trade? What does the ruler receive? His reported totals cannot be treated as secure modern statistics. Manuscripts differ, numbers may have been corrupted, and information could have come from official estimates. But his awareness of salt revenue is significant because it belongs to the hidden structure beneath imperial splendor. The great city, the relay station, the paper note, and the salt administration are not separate marvels. Together, they form a system. Messages move through stations. Goods move along roads and waterways. Cities gather trade. Officials measure and tax it. Controlled commodities provide revenue. Paper currency circulates through the same administrative world. This is the strongest pattern within Marco Polo's account. He often looks past the wonder and asks what supports it. Such attention could reflect a merchant's experience of Yuan territories. It could also reflect conversations with people who understood the empire from within. Reliable information did not need to remain where it originated. It could travel. And then the investigation reaches the silences. For generations, skeptics have pointed to things Marco Polo appears not to have described. The argument seems simple. A man who spent years in Yuan-ruled China should have noticed its most recognizable features. If they are absent, perhaps he never went there. But the test becomes less simple when each omission is placed in its 13th century setting. The most famous example is the Great Wall. The monumental wall, familiar from modern images, with long lines of brick and stone crossing mountain ridges, is largely associated with construction and reconstruction under the later Ming dynasty. Earlier walls and frontier defenses certainly existed, but they did not form the exact continuous structure fixed in popular imagination. Their political meaning under the Yuan was also different. The dynasty had been founded by Mongol conquerors whose power came from beyond the northern frontiers those earlier defenses had been built to protect. Older walls remained part of the landscape, but they did not hold the same strategic position they would under later rulers. Marco's failure to describe the Ming period Great Wall therefore cannot prove that he never entered Yuan China. Tea presents a more immediate difficulty. Tea was widely consumed and economically important. Its absence from the surviving account is notable, especially because Marco often noticed commodities and trade. But silence cannot explain itself. Perhaps Marco did not consider tea unusual enough to emphasize. Perhaps it did not suit the purposes of the account, or a passage changed as the book moved through languages and manuscripts. None of these possibilities can be proven. The omission remains curious, but not decisive. The absence of chopsticks is similarly inconclusive. An ordinary eating implement may simply have fallen outside the interests of a merchant describing rulers, regions, and trade. The silence concerning Chinese writing and printing is more difficult to set aside. The written culture of Yuan China was extensive, and printing had a long history. A traveler claiming years of movement through the empire might be expected to say more about the scripts, books, and systems of literacy he encountered. Yet Marco moved within a multilingual imperial environment. Yuan administration involved different languages, scripts, regional traditions, and communities. A foreigner could function through interpreters without learning to read Chinese texts. His book was also not designed as a systematic study of language or literature. This does not make the omission meaningless. It makes its meaning uncertain. Foot-binding existed among parts of Chinese society but was neither universal nor shared equally across the populations governed by the Yuan. Marco's silence is notable, but not proof that he never entered China. The larger problem is the method used to judge him. A medieval travel account cannot be tested by taking a list of things associated with later images of China and asking whether every one appears. The first question must be whether a feature existed in the same form during the Yuan period. Then comes visibility. Would Marco's route, contacts, linguistic access, and interests have brought it to his attention? Would it have suited the kind of book he and Rustic Hello were creating? Could it have been altered or lost during transmission? These questions weaken some famous objections. They do not erase all of them. If Marco spent many years in Yuan territories and served Kublai Khan in a position of importance, the combined silences remain difficult to ignore. A missing mention of chopsticks proves little. A broader weakness concerning language, writing, and familiar social practices is more puzzling. The same unevenness appears in his positive evidence. His relay network is functionally convincing, but its numbers are unstable. His black stones fit known coal use, but the detail could have reached him second-hand. His Hangzhou resembles a real commercial city, though some totals appear exaggerated. His knowledge of salt and taxation is significant, but informed contacts could have supplied it. The book repeatedly moves close to the Yuan world without revealing the exact position from which Marco observed it. Taken together, the evidence resists both complete credulity and complete dismissal. Its geography can be precise and uncertain. Its institutions can be recognizable while its numbers become impossible. Its silences can be suspicious without being decisive. Its descriptions may preserve direct observation beside reports gathered from people moving through the same imperial networks. Still, a pattern has emerged. The account understood important elements of Yuan power: communication, fuel, urban commerce, taxation, transport, and administration. It knew that the empire depended not merely upon conquest, but upon messages, horses, markets, waterways, controlled commodities, officials, and revenue. That world was real. The remaining question is whether the reality reached the book through Marco Polo's own journeys, through the knowledge of others, or through a mixture now hidden inside the surviving manuscripts. The strongest evidence may confirm the world he described without yet revealing exactly how he came to know it. The records of the Yuan dynasty preserve fragments of an empire at work. They contain appointments, taxes, embassies, court affairs, military commands, and regional administration. Names appear beside duties. Places appear beside revenues. Decisions made at the center leave traces far from the throne. Yet when researchers search this incomplete documentary landscape for an unmistakable Marco Polo, they do not find him. No surviving Yuan document has been universally accepted as an unambiguous record of the Venetian traveler. No entry securely identifies the man later tradition placed near Kublai Khan, carrying out missions and enjoying unusual imperial confidence. The silence matters. If Marco truly held a high formal office, governed an important city, or served for years as one of the Khan's trusted agents, the lack of clear corroboration becomes difficult to ignore. But Yuan documentation survives unevenly. Many original administrative records have disappeared, while later compilations preserved selected events and figures rather than every merchant, visitor, interpreter, temporary envoy, or foreign assistant who passed through Mongol service. Even a surviving reference might not resemble the name Marco Polo. Foreign names could be shortened, translated, described, or written through unfamiliar sounds. There is another possibility. Perhaps the problem lies not only in the records, but in what later readers expected to find within them. Marco's book speaks of favor, travel, missions, and service. Over time, these claims grew into a grand official career. The traveler became a governor, advisor, and intimate servant of the emperor. The traditional association with Yangzhou is revealing. The surviving text has sometimes been read as saying that Marco governed the city for several years. But the wording varies, its meaning is disputed, and no independent evidence securely confirms that he held such a position. Being present within the Yuan world is one claim. Carrying out occasional assignments is another. Holding exceptional influence at court is stronger still. These possibilities do not require the same evidence, and the surviving book does not support them equally. The missing name may therefore challenge the scale of Marco's later reputation more strongly than it challenges every possibility of his journey. To understand how that reputation formed, the investigation must leave the Yuan records and return to the prison where the book began. Marco came back to Venice in the 1290s. After conflict with Genoa led to his imprisonment, he met Rustic Hello of Pisa, and around 1298 the two men collaborated on the account that would carry Marco's name across Europe. The book was created after the journey through memory, possible notes, oral narration, family knowledge, and Rusticello's literary craft. His background in chivalric romance could shape the presentation of distant courts and marvels without proving the journey fictional. The result is a mixed voice. Practical descriptions may preserve direct experience or informed reports, while other passages carry the conventions of medieval storytelling. Then the text passed beyond both men. The original dictated manuscript has not survived. What remains is a family of copies, translations, abridgments, and expansions in which wording, place names, passages, and numbers vary. Historians are therefore comparing descendants of a lost work, not an untouched original. Transmission may explain some inconsistencies, but it cannot excuse every error or exaggeration. From this uncertain record, several explanations emerge. The first is that Marco was, in broad outline, the traveler he claimed to be. He crossed Asia with his family, spent substantial time in the Mongol-led Yuan world, learned through direct experience and informed contacts, and later narrated what he remembered. The strongest support for this view lies in the cumulative pattern of the book. Marco repeatedly understood the function of institutions. His descriptions connect communication, commerce, taxation, transport, cities, and administration into a coherent picture of the Yuan world. The wider history of the period also matters. Europeans and other foreigners did travel through Mongol-controlled Asia. The journey was dangerous and exceptional, but it was not impossible. Still, this interpretation does not require Marco to have seen everything he described. A traveler can be genuine and a book can remain imperfect. The second explanation preserves the journey but reduces the legend. Marco may have reached Yuan territories and traveled widely while later presenting his access to Kublai Khan, his missions, or his importance more impressively than the surviving evidence can confirm. This possibility fits the book's uneven character particularly well. It explains why some descriptions contain convincing structural knowledge while others rely on reports. It explains extravagant numbers, confident statements about distant places, and uncertainty surrounding Marco's official position. His memories may have merged with family experience, commercial information, and oral reports. Rustic Hello may have strengthened Marco's role because medieval narratives favored a central traveler moving close to rulers and wonders. None of this requires a deliberate plan to deceive. Memory compresses years. Stories merge. A journey retold after returning home becomes clearer in some places and grander in others. The teller remembers what mattered to him, while the writer shapes what will matter to an audience. This interpretation suggests that Marco may be most reliable when describing systems whose operation he understood, less secure when giving enormous totals, and hardest to verify when presenting his own place within the imperial court. The third explanation is more skeptical. Perhaps Marco traveled through western or central parts of the Mongol world but never reached Yuan-ruled China. According to this theory, he constructed the eastern sections from knowledge gathered through commercial and political networks. The argument has real weight. No unambiguous Yuan record identifies him. Important parts of his chronology and route remain uncertain. Several expected subjects are absent. Some numerical claims strain belief. The account was created after the supposed journey through collaboration with a Romance writer, and the original text is gone. The connected Mongol world made second-hand knowledge unusually mobile. A merchant in one region could learn about the monetary practices, cities, and revenues of another through partners, caravans, and embassies. But the theory of complete fabrication faces its own difficulty. It must explain not one correct fact, but a pattern. The account repeatedly places real institutions, commercial practices, geographic sequences, and forms of administration within a recognizable Yuan setting. A determined compiler could have assembled such knowledge from informed sources. Yet the more coherent the pattern becomes, the more those sources must resemble the experience of someone deeply connected to the world Marco claimed to enter. Second-hand transmission was possible. Possibility alone does not show that it produced the entire book. The comparison makes one distinction increasingly clear: Marco's broad journey into the Mongol Yuan world is more plausible than the grand official career later legend built around it. Near the end of Marco's life, a later tradition claimed that he was asked to withdraw the incredible parts of his story and replied that he had not told even half of what he had seen. The wording and reliability of the anecdote are uncertain, and it cannot prove his honesty. Even Marco's final defense reaches us through retelling. That is how completely the man became entangled with the book. And yet the world inside that book does not dissolve. The paper currency, relay stations, coal fires, canals of Hangzhou, salt revenues, and administrative systems belong to a coherent 13th century empire. Some details were exaggerated. Some were probably second-hand. Some may have been altered long after Marco's death. But the structure beneath them is real. Marco Polo was probably neither the flawless witness of popular legend nor a complete inventor who created an imaginary China without approaching it. A real journey into the Mongol Yuan world became a more complicated book, shaped by what Marco saw, what others knew, what rustic Hello wrote, and what generations of copyists preserved. The story began with a paper note that seemed impossible to European readers. That note passed from hand to hand because an empire gave it value. The surviving manuscripts passed from hand to hand because generations believed the world inside them was worth preserving. One remains evidence of the institutions Marco described. The others reveal how difficult it is to recover the man behind the description. The empire is no longer the deepest mystery. The mystery is how much of Marco Polo can still be separated from the extraordinary story that survived him.